Sorry, I'm kind of losing my voice. I've been talking all day, so hopefully it doesn't crack in the middle of this. My name is Ron Buffington. I'm head of the art department here at UTC. We're really happy to have you here with us as we host 2014 Diane Marek Visiting Artist Greg Smith. Tonight, Greg will be discussing his artistic practice, after which we'll open his exhibition in the Cress Gallery entitled, I hope I can handle this, Breakdown Lane Orrery. Is that close enough? I've sympathized with you as you proposed the word Orrery. This is only one small part of Greg's itinerary while he's here. He will be meeting with members of the Chattanooga arts community. I believe there was a lunch today for Roy. We'll be holding discussions in the gallery. We'll be visiting our upper division BFA students in the studios. And all of this is possible thanks to the generosity of the artist, the hard work of our director and curator, Ruth Grover, the support of the Marek family, and the vision of Diane Marek. Can we take a minute just to thank everyone? I'd also like to take a minute to thank the Friends of the Gallery. I know I always mention this, but I think it's really important. There are plenty of visiting artist programs that are basically involved, flying the artist in, having a talk, having a fancy dinner, and then flying the artist back out. This is a unique program in that we bring the artist in with a concurrent exhibition. The visit, as I've already mentioned, is substantial. And those two things really make for a meaningful and unique program. We're extremely proud of the Diane Marek Visiting Artist Series. If you're a friend of the gallery in the audience, we really thank you for your support. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We look forward to these visits, the associated workshops, lectures, and exhibitions, and we're very proud to share all of this with you. At this point, I'll turn the floor over to Ruth Grover, our director and curator, and she will introduce the artist. Enjoy yourselves tonight.
And thank you very much, Ron, for these words. Of course, it is a really enormous opportunity that we have to bring an artist in alongside an exhibition, and that was Diane's vision. And with that, we do have an exhibition next door, and I have some thank yous to make to some special people who help that exhibition happen. And I know that Greg joins me in thanking them also.
This is true.
Yes. Of course, we have to thank Susan Inglet of Susan Inglet Gallery in New York City, who represents Greg, and of course was instrumental in our ability to bring the exhibition and Greg here. I'd like to thank Sam Fort, who is the manager of the Hayes Concert Hall, for his expertise and physical assistance with the scissor lift. I'd like to thank John Burgess, Larry Brick, and Steve Ray. Steve is the head of the UTC Department of Theater. John Burgess and Larry Brick are both faculty there, for their expertise and assistance, and you'll see why when you walk in through the gallery. I'd like to thank Brian Gross and his crew from Rock Solid Productions, Charlie Orr and his crew from Wholesale Supply Group on 23rd Street, and if you need a bathtub, that's the place to go. Also, the gallery assistants who gave their weekend, actually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to assist Greg under his direction in the installation of this rather complicated exhibition. Eric Montesinos, gallery staff, Jeremy Jones, Olivia Wagstaff. Olivia, I know you're here. Diamond Rayford, and our special gallery project hires, Aaron Cowan. Aaron, there you are, yeah. Adam Kirby, and Kyle Wood. And they were instrumental and wonderful to work with, so let's give them a hand. And, of course, the artist is here. here, that the artist is here, Greg Smith. Greg's a native of DeKalb, Illinois. He holds a BA from Amherst College, a PhD in physics from Harvard, and an MFA from Hunter College in New York. He's a 2013 John Simon Guggenheim Fellow. Has been the recipient of a studio residency from the Manhattan Community Arts Fund, grants from the Remo Port Mann Foundation, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Center, and Hunter College Nancy Ashton Memorial Fund. He's had a recent solo exhibition in January 2014, Quality Uncertainty, The Market for Lemons at Falconer College, Grinnell, Iowa. Falconer Gallery, Grinnell College in Iowa. And numerous solo exhibitions in New York City. Group exhibitions include Cluster 2006, Participant New York, curated by Katie Holden, and Hunch and Flail in 2009 at the Artist Space in New York City, curated by Amy Silman. And his video, The Shoe and the Umbrella, 2005, was screened at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and you'll have a chance to see that video tonight after the lecture as we visit the exhibition. And of course, this is an incredible opportunity. Over the past 8.5 years, 25 artists we brought to Chattanooga as part of the Diane Marek Visiting Artist series. That's really amazing. That doesn't count OK Mountain, which was a collective of 8 people. And I counted them as only one. So here tonight is the 26th, Greg Smith. Greg, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ruth. Very quickly, I would like to thank Ruth personally. As an artist getting ready for this exhibition, I made a number of requests on preparing for the exhibition, some fairly standard, some a little weird, and some downright obnoxious. And Ruth has done a great job getting all of this ready. And again, all the people who helped, for me, thank you so much. The students, the staff, other department people, and the friends, thank you so much. Okay, so let's see, 45 minutes talking about my stuff. Okay. Now, I'm not really going to talk about my work too much, but I am going to talk about talking about my work a whole lot, and I hope the idea is, this might be a disaster, but the idea is that by doing this, I'll kind of illuminate my process much more than if I were to kind of directly talk about my work. We'll see, okay? But there's a pretty clear starting point, okay? I made a road movie. It's called Breakdown Lane, and the exhibition kind of plays off the video. So let's talk about road movies a little bit. They had their heyday in the 60s and 70s, right, in Hollywood. They all followed a pretty similar outline, protagonists in a burst of rebellion or optimism or hope for something better, take to the road, off they go into the wide open American West usually, although things have diversified greatly since then. But these wide open spaces in search of something, a person, a place, an ideal, something. And the ever-present horizon, always there, always out of reach, becomes a symbol for the basic, what the protagonists actually do. And things actually don't go well. They never reach their goal often. People usually end up dead or disillusioned, or it's just not a good deal, certainly ending in failure. I do something similar with my Breakdown Lane, but I just start with a failure and then cut right to the chase. How do I stop this? I just start with the failure, cut right to the chase, and then go from there. Now, why? Whoops, sorry, folks. I should have done this before. Okay, at least now I know where I am. Okay, so Microsoft. So why do I bother with the road movie in the first place? I think there's something interesting about this this process, one thing after another, this journey, which has an interesting relationship toward the goal that's never reached, but it's there. But maybe it's the journey that's important. It kind of goes back and forth. it struck me that there are many things in cultural history that kind of went through this, starting with, for example, or way before too, but for example, the flaneur of, I don't speak French, I don't know if I'm totally mispronouncing that, but the flaneur of Paris in the 1900s, this man, it was always a man back then, just kind of walking through the city, a man of the crowd, but sort of a connoisseur at the same time, a connoisseur of the city. And Walter Benjamin wrote a lot about the flaneur. And for example, in his Arcades project, he writes about the flaneur. An intoxication comes over the man who walks long and aimlessly through the streets. With each step, the walk takes on a greater momentum. Ever weaker grow the temptations of shops, of bistros, of smiling women. Ever more irresistible, the magnetism of the next street corner, of a distant mass of foliage, of a street name. And in case the parallel between this kind of road movie idea and this flaneur is not clear enough, he also writes a little bit later on, asphalt was first used for sidewalks. Okay? And so a little later, there's John Cage, also very well known. It's a travesty that I'm even mentioning John Cage because my work is so far from the kind of Zen-like careful measure he took of the creative process. But still, very interesting thinker. And he would talk about, standard art things, form and content, or he called it materials more, structure. But when he talked about form, he actually kind of scooted that aside a little bit and talked about the idea of continuity, okay? In his lecture on nothing, now that's a good talk. In his lecture on nothing, he writes, I'm going to try, he actually wrote out a score for this. I'm going to try to say it correctly. I'm going to sound like an idiot, I'm sure. Put the pause and everything. Okay. Continuity today, when it is necessary, is a demonstration of disinterestedness. That is, it is a proof that our delight lies in not possessing anything. Each moment presents what happens. Regarded as something seen momentarily, as though from a window while traveling. Okay? And in contemporary, kind of like much more lowbrow, this kind of, one thing after another of the kind of road trip of the trip on the asphalt, kind of much more lowbrow, we just got clickbait. Okay? We got one thing after another, after another, after another, maybe hoping something happens. Maybe finally something satisfying is there, or maybe it's just a compulsion. It's just going, one thing after another. So all these things are about this sort of, this one more step, or one more mile, or one more town, one more image, one more click, one more frame, and then another frame, and then another frame. There's something sort of, the way it keeps popping up, this one thing after another keeps popping up in such a wide variety of ways. It's like there's something basic about our experience that kind of leads us back to that. And it's not just an art thing, it's like a life experience, excuse me, a life experience thing. So even this talk is just one thing after another, as I say that, and then I say that again, and then I say another word, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But of course that's, and I have to admit, I'm sort of like at an impasse at this point, because I've given you some sort of introduction to to what started this whole project. And now I'm like, okay, what should I talk about now? I could talk about some specifics about how I approach this project, like what my interests are in authors or other artists, or what my interest in materials in, or why all the beach chairs, or what's with the bathtubs, or the orrery, or what my process is, how do I think about it, where do I start, what comes first, words or music. I could talk about all these things, and these are all relevant things. Without a doubt, they give a background, they provide a context. They help illuminate what's over there, even though they are definitely not at all what's over there, okay? So, although they're relevant, I'm having trouble because to me they're somehow all equivalent, okay? They're all just these things I could talk about that are context, but not the thing itself. I could just ask you to vote what you'd be interested in hearing. I could roll a die and go from there. But I want to kind of like muddle around this murk a little bit of this being unable to kind of decide what to say next. I'm an armchair scientist, okay? Which means I love TED Talks. And so I sought guidance in TED Talks. and I have been diagnosed, all right? And I am thrilled about this, okay? So this actually isn't a TED Talk to start with, but this guy does them. A lot of interesting neuropsychology research recently that I found very useful. What is it? Control F, I think? Okay, so there are two of them. I'll play them both in series, okay?
At what point should we schedule the next appointment, Tuesday or Wednesday? And as you describe it in the book, he spends, I think, 20 or 30 minutes saying, well, Tuesday has this advantages, Wednesday has this advantages, unable to make up his mind.
Right, exactly. And that is a very illustrative example because it shows you on the one hand that the cognitive abilities, the ability to manipulate data and to make analysis of costs and benefits in a very cold way is maintained. And people can still do that. Well, but the thing I most liked in these patients when we asked them about restaurants, and this was really quite remarkable. And they said, what restaurant do you want to go to tonight? And said, well, we could go to this one. And they said, but I take it that this restaurant has been rather empty recently, so that's probably a bad sign. It's a sign that the food may not be so good. On the other hand, it's true that if it is more empty, we're likely to get a table, and therefore we should go there. But then, and the thing will go on endlessly until you really feel like pounding on the table and said, well, get real and choose. But the reason why they can't choose is that they haven't got this sort of lift that comes from emotion. It is emotion that allows you to mark things as good, bad, or indifferent, literally in the flesh. And it is that kind of emotional impetus that they are lacking. They cannot conjure up for a given situation an emotional state that would decide them in one direction or another.
Okay, so there it is, okay? Now, granted, he's talking about his patients who have been severely brain damaged and have had part of their brain just knocked out, the part of their brain that deals with processing emotions, okay? But still, we can learn something from this, or I can learn something from this. To make these decisions, I need some sort of emotional connection with the material to kind of push me one way or another, okay? And there's more about making decisions. This is, so that was Antonio Damasio. This is, Dan Ariely. He's a professor at some esteemed institution. So this is also about decision making. It may or may not be useful.
This is one of my favorite plots in social sciences. It's from a paper by Johnson and Goldstein. And it basically shows the percentage of people who indicate that they would be interested in giving their organs to donation. And these are different countries in Europe, and you basically see two types of countries. Countries on the right that seems to be giving a lot, and countries on the left that seems to be giving very little or much less. The question is why? Why do some countries give a lot and some countries give a little? When you ask people this question, they usually think that it has to be something about culture, right? How much do you care about people? Giving your organs to somebody else is probably about how much you care about society, how linked you are. Or maybe it is about religion. But if you look at this plot, you could see that countries that we think about as very similar actually exhibit very different behavior. For example, Sweden is all the way on the right, and Denmark, that we think is culturally very similar, is all the way on the left. Germany is on the left, and Austria is on the right. The Netherlands is on the left, and Belgium is on the right. And finally, depending on your particular version of European similarity, you can think about the UK and France as either similar culturally or not. But it turns out that from organ donation, they're very different. By the way, the Netherlands is an interesting story. You see, the Netherlands is kind of the biggest of the small group. Turns out that they got to 28% after mailing every household in the country a letter begging people to join this organ donation program. Right, so you know the expression, begging only gets you so far? It's 28% in organ donation. But whatever the countries on the right are doing, they're doing a much better job than begging. So what are they doing? Turns out the secret has to do with the form at the DMV. And here's the story. The countries on the left have a form at the DMV that looks something like this. Check the box below if you want to participate in the organ donor program. And what happens? People don't check and they don't join. The countries on the right, the ones that give a lot, have a slightly different form. It says, check the box below if you don't want to participate. Interestingly enough, when people get this, they again don't check, but now they join the program. Now, think about what this means. You know, we wake up in the morning and we feel we make decisions. We wake up in the morning and we open the closet and we feel that we decide what to wear, and we open the refrigerator and we feel that we decide what to eat. And what this is actually saying that much of these decisions are not residing within us. They're residing by the person who's designing that form. When you walk into the DMV, the person who designed the form will have a huge influence on what you'll end up doing. Now, it's also very hard to intuit these results. Think about it for yourself. How many of you believe that if you went to renew your license tomorrow and you went to the DMV and you would encounter one of these forms, that would actually change your own behavior? Very, very hard to think that it will influence us, right? We can say, oh, these funny Europeans, of course it would influence them. But when it comes to us, we have such a feeling that we're at the driver's seat. We have such a feeling that we're in control and we are making the decision that it's very hard to even accept the idea that we actually have an illusion of making a decision rather than actual decision. Now, you might say, you know, these are decisions we don't care about. In fact, by definition, these are decisions about something that will happen to us after we die. How could we care about something less than something that happens after we die? So a standard economist, somebody who believes in rationality, would say, you know what? The cost of lifting the pencil and marking a V is higher than the possible benefit of the decision, so that's why we get this effect. But in fact, it's not because it's easy, it's not because it's trivial, it's not because we don't care, it's the opposite. It's because we care, it's difficult, and it's complex, and it's so complex that we don't know what to do. And because we have no idea what to do, we just pick whatever it was chosen for us.
Okay, so love these TED Talks, and I mean they're gems. I aspire someday to have something to talk about in a TED Talk. And I have learned something about my situation here. Let me just get this set up. Full screen mode. Okay. So I learned something about my situation as I'm preparing these talks, like I think. So for the first one, okay, decisions reside, okay, Antonio Damasio, decisions are about emotions. So he talks about his patients who have everything, rationally their brains are spot on. They can weigh the pros and cons. They can think about this versus that. And these are the qualities we expect when we're talking or thinking about someone who is a good decision maker. But no, without the emotional part of our psychology, it turns out we have a very, very hard time making decisions. That's what leads to decisions. Okay, fine. So decisions come from within. There's some sort of like emotional marking that things have that help push us one way or another. Great. Talk number 2, okay? Decisions, apparently, are about, well, a lot of times we just don't know what to do and we're kind of on autopilot. Even though we think we're making these decisions, actually we're kind of nudged one way or another by some external things that are happening without us, that are kind of pushing us one way or the other. Now, I'm having a hard time kind of reconciling these two things. Is it like it's kind of an inner emotional thing, or is it an external nudge, or is it both? I mean, decisions are kind of inner outer or outer inner. I'm not quite sure what to do. If Ted were here, I would ask for some help, okay? But the point is that it's, you know, these things, although they're gems, it's helped me understand that what decisions I make about how to present my work, the decisions will probably be bad, apparently, and other research says lots of other things about like how whatever story I might tell to motivate my decisions are mostly fabricated and not really connected to what actually happened. There's a whole slew of research in this direction. So, you know, these decisions, I'm still not any closer to figuring out where to go next with talking about my work. I know my decisions won't be very good, but one thing that strikes me is that I've been setting this up so like this idea of the road movie, this idea of kind of driving on this vast expanse of the American West is somehow similar to me trying to put together this talk, right? I mean, that's sort of like my thesis at this point. But of course, it's way easier just to drive than it is to put together a talk, So what am I missing, okay? And what I'm missing is one thing I might be missing. I might be missing thousands of things, but one thing I am missing is the idea of structure, okay? Roads are there. You can't just drive willy-nilly. If you just keep driving, if you default, you just drive down the road and you just keep on going. Talks are much less structured. I can do lots of things up here. I have to like speak grammatically. I have to finish in about 15 minutes or so, or 20, excuse me. I have to finish in about 27 minutes, okay? But beyond that, it's pretty wide open, okay? Now, the flaneur, he has to stay on the sidewalk. The buildings are in the way. You might get run over by cars if it goes in the street. There are people around. So there's that constraint for the walker. There's that constraint for the driver. John Cage talked about the importance of constraint. He would talk about the idea of like structure, how it's necessary for the creative process. It's like a glass, okay? You can pour whatever you want in the glass, anything you want, but you must have the glass there to provide structure, to provide constraint. Otherwise, it will be, as he says, unseen. It will be just something that has nothing to it and just gets, and doesn't, and it has in its own way sort of no content. Okay. So, it would be great to have some structure, okay? But what about the case with this where there's not a lot of structure? What about the case where there's really no immediate structure at all? Okay, what to do? Or what about if the structure actually is something that you kind of have to make up on the fly if there's no ready one to go to? What does that look like? Maybe at this point it's a good time to take a step back, kind of get a bigger picture and get out of the one thing after another muck. A different point of view. How about this one? Oh no. Okay, great. Now, that is a point of view. Look at that distant horizon. It's all there. It is not as well above the muck of the step by step and the one thing after another. It is hard, though, to take a painting like this seriously any longer. Very hard. I look at this and think, oh, Jesus Christ, here's another, I don't know, just white male asshole surveying his domain again, okay? And actually, just today, I was at the Hunter down the street, and there was this beautiful photograph of like a similar kind of like sort of natural thing. It was like a photograph, this beautiful photograph. Maybe some of you have seen it, like this gorgeous kind of like cloud. It's colored. It's the most beautiful thing. And the artist I wrote, Diane Rosenblum wrote. The title was, I think there is too much negative space in the sky, which was a comment that someone left online about this beautiful, awe-inspiring, majestic image. So these sort of like majestic images, it's hard to take them seriously in a lot of ways. But boy, I do like that point of view. It is all there. It is all there. This person's not getting any closer to the horizon, but he doesn't seem to care. Okay? He's got it all laid out in front of him. And boy, that high perspective, I'll tell you, I am terrified of heights. But there is something to be said for them. I don't know if you've seen any of my videos or anything like that, but I do some very risky, dangerous things on them. One time, I did a whole series of things where I had to climb up under this very high overpass, kind of underneath, and it was dangling, and I was terrified. Like I said, I'm not a real fan of heights. But the interesting thing was, although I was freaked out about doing this and so nervous about it, I was afraid I would like be injured or killed or end up in jail or something like that. Once I got up there and was doing it, oh, it was great. I'm telling you, I was clear-headed, I was focused, I was calm. I was still terrified, but I was surprisingly calm and collected. And after that whole experience, like, wow, what was that? So I did some research. I mean, I kind of like knew this like adrenaline junkie label, people who do crazy things, risk takers, but I didn't feel like I was surging with adrenaline and like, some like, I don't know, some chest beating, I don't know what, but like it was different than that. So I did some research, and I did some research by searching on the internet. And here's something I found. Edmund Burke, the father of conservatism, wrote about aesthetics also, way back in the day. Whatever is fitted in any sort to excite the ideas of pain and danger, that is to say, whatever is in any sort terrible, or is conversant about terrible objects, or operates in a manner analogous to terror, is the source of the sublime. That is, it is productive of the strongest emotion which the mind is capable of feeling. When danger or pain press too nearly, they are incapable of giving any delight, and yet, with certain modifications, they may be, and they are delightful. Bingo! Okay? That's what that was. Okay, I was experiencing the sublime. Great. So the sublime is kind of interesting, right? Because it's like, it's sort of, the idea of it sort of emerged as the age of reason, enlightenment, stuff like that, kind of like, put a couple of pockmarks on the idea of God. And so it was almost as if like there was sort of like intellectuals or were looking for some sort of almost a replacement. And the sublime does have this kind of really kind of like Old Testament, New Testament combination thing. On one hand, there's like the sublime is about awe and something too grand to even comprehend. On the other hand, it has this sort of spiritual side that kind of like sort of peace or sort of some sort of better understanding of one's place in the world. For example, Wordsworth, Romantic poet, Tintern Abbey, of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. Okay? Sounds sort of sweet and spiritual. So that's kind of the other side of the sublime. And the sublime has plenty of currency nowadays too. Okay? So it keeps popping up in various ways. For example, Alain de Botton said, for thousands of years it has been nature and its supposed creator that had a monopoly on awe. It had been the ice caps, the deserts, the volcanoes and the glaciers that had given us a sense of finitude and limitation, and has elicited a feeling in which fear and respect coagulated into a strangely pleasant feeling of humility, a feeling which the philosophers of the 18th century had famously termed the sublime. But then had come a transformation to which we are still heirs. Over the course of the 19th century, the dominant catalyst for that feeling of the sublime had ceased to be nature. We were now deep in an era of the technological sublime, when all could be most powerfully invoked, not by forest or icebergs, but by supercomputers, rockets, and particle accelerators. We were now almost exclusively amazed by ourselves. But I would go a little further than that. So he's still talking about scale. He's still linking the sublime with scale. I felt that I experienced the sublime without scale. And I think that there are plenty of people in Jackass videos and YouTube videos who perhaps also sort of experience sublime in that way. Can't talk for them. But this is sort of like a DIY sublime, okay? Small scale. And yet, put yourself in a terrible, risky situation, and boy, that's an interesting state of mind, and a strangely peaceful one. So, why is it that I put myself repeatedly in several projects in incredibly risky situations? It's because I'm a romantic. I am part of a long, long tradition of the romantic impulse, of seeking out and appreciating the sublime. Or maybe I sought out these risky situations because of my childhood. Let me tell you my childhood. Okay? So, grew up in the Midwest, run-of-the-mill place. If there was anything really interesting about my childhood, well, there wasn't anything interesting about my childhood, but if there was one sort of interesting thing about my neighborhood is it was, everyone had in the neighborhood had a sandbox. Lots of kids, lots of families, lots of pets, and lots of sandboxes. And I'm not talking about just ordinary sandboxes. I'm talking about some pretty amazing sandboxes. Why? There was a business in the town where I grew up, in the area where I grew up, that took it upon themselves, kind of like as a PR thing, or kind of like build community or whatever. Every spring they would come by with a giant dump truck and they would offload sand to all the families in the area with kids. And so everyone had this sandbox that would get refreshed every year, and they kept kind of growing and growing and growing. Now, sandboxes are like this, this kind of like amazing part of childhood, right? Or these, like, it's almost a symbol of childhood. It's like how great it is you have a sandbox. Let me tell you, if you had a sandbox your old childhood, they are boring, okay? You can pile some sand up. You can take your truck and move it around. You can stick a stick in it. You can throw it at somebody if they irritate you. That's pretty much about it. Unless there's no body of water nearby, there's not much happening. But we were saved by the neighborhood cats, okay? The cats also loved the sandboxes. It was a smorgasbord of litter boxes scattered throughout the neighborhood, so they used them. And we really enjoyed the cat feces. First of all, let's be clear. Fecal matter has been used as a building material from the beginning of history of mankind, okay? So you cover the outside with a little sand. They dry out a little bit. They're still kind of malleable, a little mushy. Suddenly, you're not just stuck with a stupid stick like pointing out of the sand. You can put sticks in there. You got like Tinker Toys basically, and all of a sudden you have like all these structures you can build. Every artist should have an origin story. So that was mine. So basically the kids in the neighborhood were pretty okay with this whole cat thing, okay? However, there are problems, okay? You should not play with cat feces because you can pick up a parasite called Toxoplasma Gondii, among other things, okay? Now, Toxoplasma Gondii is a great parasite. All parasites are pretty cool, but this one is awesome. So, slight detour. We'll come back to the sandbox and art in a second, but now let's talk Toxoplasma. It is a parasite that lives in the cat's gut, doesn't harm the cat doesn't even notice, but it needs the cat's intestine, large intestine, the conditions in there are what it needs to reproduce, okay? So Toxoplasma infects the cat doesn't notice. The Toxoplasma gets to the large intestine, reproduces lots of baby Toxoplasma, and then the cat takes dump, and all the babies are out into the world, out of the place they need to be to reproduce, okay? They're just in a pile of feces now. Problem, how do the little young parasites get back into the cat so they can reproduce? Okay, I'm sure this is something that's been popping up with the popular media every now and then. I'm sure some of you know what this stuff is, but what it does is it focuses on rats and mice. The idea is, of course, rats and mice will they're scuffling on the ground all the time. Maybe they'll kind of come up against some cat feces and be infected by Toxoplasma. Great, okay? But the Toxoplasma is not happy because it can't reproduce in the rat gut, okay? It still needs to get back in the cat. Oh, wait, but cats eat rats. Cats eat mice. Great, that's good. Toxoplasma is not satisfied. Over millions of years, it has developed a series of strategies whereby it basically controls or modifies the rat's brain. It makes the rat more prone to risky behavior. It makes the cat not fearful. It makes the rats not fearful of cats, but it makes them kind of think they're okay, maybe even attracted to them. The rats, therefore, are much more likely to get eaten. Toxoplasma is back in the cat gut, can reproduce, and it's happy. Amazing, amazing parasite. Humans get infected by Toxoplasma all the time. It doesn't really harm humans, usually, unless you're a pregnant woman. But there's increasing evidence that it actually does affect us psychologically in subtle ways. It's not really well tuned for us because it doesn't care about us. Cats don't eat us, and they can't reproduce us. It doesn't care about us. But we're mammals. We're not that different from rats. And so it does seem to kind of like mess with our brains a little bit. And I am certain, how could I not have Toxoplasma myself? Okay? So, what does it do? It does many things. It affects mental illness in not a good way. mental health in not a good way. It makes people more prone to take on risks. You are far more likely, one is far more likely to die in a fatal car crash if one is infected by Toxoplasma than if not. Because it's subtle, okay, because it infects so many people, scientists start thinking, well, maybe even if the effect is subtle, maybe it kind of like actually has like a really important and measurable effect on cultures at large because so many people are infected. For example, schizophrenia is linked to Toxoplasma, and actually schizophrenia started to appear, excuse me, in the medical literature at around the same time that cats started to be domesticated and kept as pets in urban areas. There's a link between increased suicide in cultures and infection with Toxoplasma. Why stop there? So this paper was talking about other things that Toxoplasma might influence. This focused on Europe, those crazy Europeans, and it talked about how, like, sort of stereotypical traits of various countries might be linked to Toxoplasma infection rates. So, for example, you have, if you look, for example, at the kind of degree of machismo in a culture, okay, that is correlated with Toxoplasma infection rates, okay? Other things, such as measures of rigidity, okay? I want to be clear, I am not making this up. Go look at this paper and read it, okay? These are correlations, not causations, correlations, okay? But still, also something that is correlated with Toxoplasma infection rates are measures of neuroticism. Well-established, well-studied tests that are used, that are given to large populations to kind of measure the overall neuroticism or a kind of overall anxiety of the population. Very closely linked with Toxoplasma infection rates. Now, this got me thinking, what else can be linked to Toxoplasma? All right? And this is written in 2006. I kept thinking, like, what other events, cultural events, involve a lot of kind of risk-taking or kind of rigid thinking or kind of like tunnel vision? And I was trying to figure out, and it struck me that soon after this was published came the financial crisis. Lots of risk-taking there. The people at the top with all the power and money, making very poor decisions, not being careful with their risk. Everyday people taking out loans that they couldn't afford. Lots of trouble, okay? I thought, is that correlated? But how do I measure then, like, whether a lot of people were engaging in risky behavior or not? What I thought, again, takes European data. I thought, well, there's a really simple thing. This is the first pass. EU bailout. The countries were kind of like conservative, not taking too many risks, then they wouldn't need an EU bailout. If they got a little crazy, then maybe they got themselves into serious trouble, and they would need an EU bailout. So let's take a look. I just took some data from this, okay? And country, some Northern European countries, Southern European countries, percent Toxoplasma infection rate, and EU bailout, yes or no? Sweden, bunch of reasonable folks, right? Moderate to low Toxoplasma infection rate. EU bailout, nope. UK, they did okay. They didn't need a bailout. Didn't do great, but they muddled through, okay, or are muddling through. Very low Toxoplasma infection rate. Ireland, interestingly, culturally very similar to the UK in a lot of ways, except, looky there, much higher Toxoplasma infection rate. Did they need a bailout? Uh-huh. Italy, they didn't, and they had a high infection rate, but they were close. Spain, Greece, I'm just saying. Now, I think because I was nervous, I talked a little fast, but it was okay. I think most of you stayed awake for the whole thing, so that's good. I think I'm going to stop right there. At this close, it's a shame. Again, I should not be invoking this person at all. But John Cage, okay, he said not ideas, but facts. Okay? I think I'll close on that. Thank you very much for your time. I'll call that.
Any questions for Greg?
Great.
How many cats do you have now?
What, I'm sorry?
How many cats do you have now?
Just one, but it's an indoor cat. So I won't get, and besides, I'm already infected, it doesn't matter. Yes? Oh God, I should have totally mentioned the artist, Caspar Friedrich. Sorry, I forgot. Yes, and I actually just cut out Frankenstein, but I love that book. What do you want to say about that?
My class was actually just talking about this on Friday, about how the picture on the front is supposed to be the sublime of the book, and Victor Frankenstein looking out over it, and about how he's sort of taking all this beauty and majesty in, and how Mary Shelley was a romanticist. And I just thought that was an interesting relation here.
Well, it's interesting because Frankenstein is not so clear on the matter, you know. I mean, or the book Frankenstein in a lot of ways. It's interesting. My favorite quote from that book, which I will completely mangle. In fact, I'll totally have to paraphrase because I can't remember what the quote is. But basically, it's kind of early on in the book, and Frankenstein is talking about he's kind of like in between, right? He's a talented scientist, right? He knows his stuff, but then he's kind of like, and he goes to school, and then he's like, you know what, I'm going to go off and create a living creature from dead bodies, okay? I'm going to create life, okay? And it's, you know, basically all the standard scientists in that book, right, say, no, don't believe in that gobbledygook, okay? And it's interesting, at this point when he's trying to think about this, he's like, I could be a scientist and take on small questions and add brick by brick to the understanding, the solid scientific understanding of the world. That's what he could have done. That's what people were encouraging him to do. But he says he does not want to do that. He's going to go grand and perhaps fail completely and perhaps do something that doesn't make any sense at all, but he is going to go big. And he doesn't just create a monster. In fact, one would argue he doesn't create a monster. He is the monster. Okay? And I couldn't help when reading that quote, and again, I'm so sorry I mangled it. I should have written it down so I could read it, but like, it pretty much described right on what an artist, I think, tries to do. So, yeah. But yes, I think that's, yeah, I love that book. Okay? Yeah, good.
Do you think, like, after doing all that research, it gave you a little bit of liberty to make, like, crazy decisions? I mean, like, do you think that, like, you could take more risks in your studio because now you have, like, research to back up?
No, it has not affected anything about how I do, but it has made me, and I've been kind of like reading about this stuff for quite a while now, it has made me much more wary of trying to explain what I do. Because I know that I am very likely full of crap. The point is I can just try to be super honest and straightforward and be very clear and just be really careful, and it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be kind of full of crap. Yes?
You used John Cage quite a bit, but you didn't talk about the role of chance. That was so big for him.
It was so big for him, and that's why I said it was an abomination that I'm even mentioning him, okay? But I will say this. I will say that I think, I would argue that to some degree he has been kind of, there was a lot more to him than that. And I guess that was so I kind of focused on something that actually I really wasn't aware of until I actually started reading what he actually said. So I was kind of interested in this other side, because the chance thing, I guess my attitude is it's so integrated now. I mean, pure chance, like rolling a die or something like that, that's still sort of unusual. And I think in a lot of ways, John Cage did that so well, and it's so, in some ways, so well designed for music in some ways that it really, it's just, he did it so well, I kind of like didn't feel like there was a lot of room left. But the idea of incorporating chance is such now part of like the dogma of being an artist that I didn't feel like there was that angle of him. And again, I'm not at all an expert, and I've just read little pieces, but that angle of him seemed to be kind of like already kind of part of the canon. But there's other parts of him that I wasn't as familiar with. I was kind of more interested in that part, at least for now. Thank you.